doing. We can't really disclose.
As Sean Diddy Combs enters his 5th day in federal court, hearing testimony from his ex, Cassie, and soon members of Danity Kane, there's one high-profile star the jury might not be hearing about. Justin Bieber, breaking his silence on the ordeal after months of speculation over their one-time relationship. His rep telling ET, although Justin is not among Sean Combs' victims, there are individuals who were genuinely harmed by him. Shifting focus away from this reality detracts from the justice these victims rightfully deserve. Bieber's questionable connection to Diddy piquing interest online as the rap mogul's indictment for sex trafficking and racketeering charges, which he denies, made headlines. Old clips of the two hanging out while Justin was underage resurfacing.
Let's just go get some girls. Let's go get some girls.
Man after my heart, that's what I'm talking about.
We hit him like this, so me and you walking, we hanging out, a little later on the night after the Usher concert.
There's also this old Jimmy Kimmel Live segment, adding to fan fears about what might have gone down with Diddy.
Got me a Lamborghini.
Oh, well, that's nice.
I haven't gotten it yet, though.
When is that coming, that Lamborghini? We talked about this last
He
time.
had the Lamborghini for a day or two, and he had access to the house, and he knows better than be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television.
Oh, apparently not.
Some things, everything ain't for everybody.
This all comes as Bieber's followers are worried for him. The singer's erratic social media posts causing concern week after week. The Beliebers asking if what he's seen behind the scenes of the industry led him to this point.
It's an emotional time in my life for sure. I've been having a lot of cries lately. Just all around just being emotional. I think it just shows how much I care.
I typically don't talk about my private life.
Well, forgive me, they put it on the television.
They put it on the television.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't go, like, really, it's your
I'll
business.
let that one go.
So, all right.
Wait, she was telling the story that...
So Terrence was a bit nervous, and I told Puff about it, and he said, have him give me a call. So we FaceTimed, and they had their man talk, and he said, make it believable. You guys, this is, going to be a great movie for you, and he's proud of us at the end of the day. It's work.
The actor talked to Puff.
Yes.
So I didn't know you call him Puff.
Yeah, Puff, Sean.
Yeah?
I think everybody has their different names.
Well, he seems like a good guy. I met him once when he was selling Ciroc vodka.
Yes.
He brought a big jug
He's
of
a
it.
big mogul. By the way, Cassie comes from our area, Connecticut.
Yes, I'm from
Do you still have family there?
I do, in New London, Connecticut.
Oh, that's nice. You getting a chance to see them while you're here?
Yeah, they came. We had a screening last night, and they came to it. It was really nice to be with them.
That's nice. All right, you can catch Cassie, The Perfect Match, tomorrow in theaters everywhere.
Yes.
So nice to meet you in
Nice
person.
to meet you as well. Thank you so much.
Say a little Puff for us.
I will.
Text him and say we said hi. Can we FaceTime him? What the heck?
Let's do it later, yes.
Yeah, all right, cool.
He's in California.
I always wanted to hang with him.
All right, there is a new restaurant in Bushwick getting a lot of buzz for its Colombian, Spanish, and Italian dishes.
Look at those dishes.
I know. We're going to talk to the owner of this restaurant.
Officially done with her testimony. She is expected to give birth any day now, according to her attorney. One of the big things that just came out is that she said she would give the $20 million settlement back. Cassie Ventura said she would give that $20 million settlement back if she never had to do freak-offs again. That was one point where she really started crying. Oh, something happened. Oh, wait, this is her husband. Hold on, her husband's coming right now. Let's see what's happening.
Are you happy it's over? How is your wife holding up?
Alex, congratulations on your baby boy.
That was Alex Fine. As like I said, they are leaving the courthouse. Her testimony is over. Their attorney just made a statement saying they're putting this chapter behind them. they don't ever plan to speak about it again.
Teas and Naughty's New York, Sean Diddy Combs was the person to be seen with.
The fire marshals came. I just remember Puff, getting on the mic when they were coming in and being like, hey, Mr. Fire Marshal, don't shut down the sexy. Don't shut down the sexy. Look at all these honeys here. I'll set you up with the table.
What was...
if you will, of the most elite level, partying of that time.
Amy Dubois was the first black American woman to run a major mainstream magazine in the States, based in Manhattan at a time when hip-hop was at its zenith.
Urban culture really ran the city. That's where all, so much of the money was. You had all the finance bros, like, trying to get into puffy parties. You had all the fashion executives trying to get into puffy parties.
Behind the glamour, prosecutors now allege there was a man capable of sexual abuse, violence, and a serious abuse of power. Criminal charges which he's already pleaded not guilty to and strenuously denies.
Puff never particularly liked me that much. I wasn't that interesting to him, I think. He was very dismissive. He really reserved that attention for the people that he was either attracted to or the people that he thought were important enough to his business success for him to kind of give that kind of attention to.
There was, she says, a tremendous amount of misogyny running through music at the time.
Things that, in today's culture would give you a tremendous amount of pause. So many things happened to me. It would be difficult to explain them all, but everything from getting, groped at parties to getting locked in a limousine with, an urban music executive and, having him refuse to let me out until I did whatever he thought I was going to do, which I didn't do. There was just so many things that happened to us, and we didn't have the vocabulary to really understand the degree to which these were problematic. Everything that was happening during that time, it was more of a sort of thread that ran throughout the culture.
Because she was able to put some of Diddy's up-and-coming artists in her magazines, she was invited to his parties, and says the man she met lacked warmth and seemed complicated.
While he was very accepted and even welcomed, by Anna Wintour, for example, and the sort of highest echelons of the fashion world. He was never known for being a calm kind of individual. When he walked in a room, all of the energy changed. Immediately the area around him would become kind of crowded and with everybody vying for his attention.
Did people know not to cross him?
Yes. Yes.
What makes you say that? Well, the rumours, I guess, of what he could do.
There were a lot of people, within journalism, within media, and also within other industries that were afraid of his influence and also afraid of his temper.
Did you see him lose his cool ever?
Of course. When things at parties wouldn't go his way, or somebody didn't bring him something quickly enough, or if there was a sort of meeting and, the conversation wasn't going his way, he would just kind of, snap. And he was just not afraid to, yell at whoever was there. There was not a lot of boundaries in his communication, let's just put it that way.
Back then, a ticket to one of Diddy's star-studded white parties was the ultimate invite.
You walk in and it's like nothing you've ever seen before. You would literally be turned away if your outfit was wrong. Puffy did not sort of tolerate people in his parties that didn't look grown and sexy, as it were. It was just every bold-faced name you could possibly imagine. It was, Donna Karan and, Ashton Kutcher and Missy Elliott. This gorgeous crowd. His mansion was decked out. All the furniture was white. There were sort of people dressed as mermaids. In the pool, people were handing out, weed brownies, on silver trays. He was bringing together these sort of elite mainstream crowds along with these elite kind of urban and hip-hop crowds.
Diddy seemed to have the golden touch, expanding his music into business enterprises that in 2022 reportedly took his net worth to £1 billion.
I think that in the black community, there is a feeling that, if a black man is successful, you don't want to bring him down because they're not, that many. These are cultural forces that are rooted in the systemic racism that's present in the United States. But I think that these were part of what potentially protected Puffy against people speaking out.
For around 10 years, Combs had a relationship with the singer Cassie, which ended in 2018. Once over, she filed a lawsuit that both parties eventually settled, alleging she was trafficked, raped, drugged and beaten by the rapper on many occasions, which he denied. And we've since heard her say similar things in court.
The last party that I ever went to, I think it was a party for post-Grammys in 2017 or something like that, 2018. And it just, the vibe was very different. He was really kind of isolated in a corner with Cassie, looking very unhappy. Cassie did look very glassy-eyed, and there was a sadness about her energy. Whatever was happening between the two of them, I mean, it didn't feel positive. They were sort of holed up in the corner for, almost the entire night. It did feel very different, from the kind of jubilant kind of energy that he projected, in his earlier incarnations.
For Diddy, his freedom depends on how these next few weeks go. His representatives claim he is the victim of a reckless media circus, saying he categorically denies he sexually abused anyone and wants to prove his innocence. In particular, they say, he looks forward to establishing the truth based on evidence, not speculation. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Look at the testimony at the Sean Diddy Combs racketeering and sex trafficking trial as former girlfriend Cassie Ventura took the stand, and what's to come this week. Joining us is ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, thank you for being here. So how well is the prosecution laying out its case? Ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, she gave some riveting and graphic testimony over 4 days, but did it move the needle in regards to the racketeering or sex trafficking charges against Combs?
So I'm sorry to be the attorney and say yes and no to that question. And the reason why I say that is, I think Cassie Ventura, we've been calling her the star witness. In my mind, she is the star victim. Her testimony was impactful. She was completely credible. I don't think there's a single word or statement that she made that people thought, she's making it up. But the reason why I say no to this is, right now the defense has done a very good job of positioning this argument of, yes, she was abused. No one is questioning that. But was it abuse because of a domestic violence relationship, or was it abuse for trafficking? I think the star witness in this case will be someone from Combs' inner circle, as they say, that says, no, this was not a toxic relationship. We knew we were trafficking her. Here are the conversations outside of Cassie's purview that she doesn't know about, but we did. I'm waiting for that witness, and I think that's when you know how strong this case is.
So that will definitely be something to watch. You were also in the courtroom last week, and I wonder just how did the jury react to this testimony from Cassie Ventura and some of the evidence presented?
So Cassie is this very soft-spoken individual and very matter-of-fact when she talks about a lot of the allegations, but there were parts of the testimony that you can see jurors really had a reaction to. When she broke down and talked about the work that she had done for her own rehabilitation, she began to cry. Near the end of her testimony, she again cried again. And then, of course, when they saw 7 different stills of those freak-offs, as stoic as many of the jurors were, we saw deep gulps, kind of sitting back in their seat, eyes widening up, and so we saw some very visceral reactions to some of the evidence that got put into this case.
Cassie's husband was actually in the courtroom, but he left at one point during your testimony.
Yeah, so I'm sitting in court, and actually, I was closer to Cassie's husband than I am to you right now, and you can see like the back of his head. And I know a lot of the journalists and people were saying, well, he was so angry about the testimony. Yes, to some degree. You can see his face turning red. You can see his jaw tightening. Don't forget, this is not just Cassie's husband. This is the father of her 2 children and third on the way. You can see him staring at Combs at many times. But the reason why he ended up leaving is not because I think the testimony got so difficult for him, but the defense is anticipating to call him as a witness in the future, and so a potential witness cannot listen to the testimony of another witness on the stand out of fear of changing or altering their testimony based on what they heard. So he did have to step out, but I don't think he's mad about the part that he stepped out in, because it was about the allegations of rape and the consensual intercourse that Cassie had with Combs after that.
Just a quick follow-up on that. That's interesting, the dynamic, because we also saw some of Diddy's kids, children, leave the courtroom too, but it seems like this is a bit different because of the potential testimony, right?
Absolutely, and I think you got to remember the time frame here, right? So it's specifically Combs' daughters left, his twin daughters who were born in 2006. They were, at the time that they left, we were talking about about allegations of Cassie having an intimate relationship with Combs shortly after their birth, at the time that their mother, Kim Porter, broke up with Combs. And of course, you're hearing these very grotesque allegations about your father. So I think it's a matter of, this is the time that my parents broke up. This is shortly after I was born, and I don't want to hear about my father in this light. I think it might have been a mixture of that. And the daughters never actually came back after leaving, I think, the second day of Cassie's testimony, and she stayed on for another 2 days.
This is all really important context that we can only get from someone inside the courtroom, Brian, so thank you. But what about the latest witness to testify, Dawn Richard? Her allegations were also contained in her civil lawsuit against Diddy, which he broadly denied. What kind of impact do you think her testimony is having?
So she was the last one to testify on Friday, and we expect her to start back up again on Monday, but she has a very limited role here. She's talking not about the allegations, as you pointed out in her civil lawsuit, as to what she claims Sean Combs did to her, but specifically about an allegation of the violence that Sean Combs put upon Cassie, where Cassie was making breakfast, it seems. Sean Combs got very mad, said, "Where's my eggs?" Came down, took the pan, and started swinging it at Cassie. The impact here is that this isn't just violence for the sake of freak-offs. This is violence for the sake of their relationship, and also the seriousness of this violence as well that Dawn Richard saw firsthand. Like I said, she's probably going to continue to testify on Monday.
So many details in this case. Brian, thank you so much for bringing us that. And make sure to follow the ABC News podcast Bad Rap, the case against Diddy. It is hosted by Brian. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And I'm hearing that it's also #1. So congratulations to you on that.
Combs is missing out on major moments in his kids' lives. As the music mogul's federal trial continues in New York, Combs' 18-year-old twin daughters, Delilah and Jessie, enjoy their senior prom in Los Angeles. The pair arrive fashionably late to the Harbor House in downtown LA May 17th. The girls, famously known for always wearing coordinating outfits, both don strapless sparkly red gowns and matching rose corsages as they smile and pose for pics on their big night. This outing for Delilah and Jessie come after they've been in NYC along with several of their siblings supporting their dad in the courtroom amid his ongoing trial. Combs has 7 children total. 30-year-old son Justin with ex-Misa Hilton, as well as 32-year-old adopted son Quincy, 27-year-old son Christian, and daughters Delilah and Jessie with Kim Porter, 18-year-old daughter Chance with ex-Sarah Chapman, and lastly, 2-year-old daughter Love with Dana Tran. The rapper, who's currently being held without bail at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, is charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs has pleaded not guilty to the charges, but faces up to life in prison if convicted. With his trial set to resume on Monday, as former Danity Kane member Dawn Richard is expected to continue her testimony.
The fate of every soul on earth is your responsibility. You gave him an aircraft carrier? I need you to trust me. One last time. Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning.
In Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial is expected to decide this morning whether to throw out a portion of last week's testimony. It concerns a witness who was called after Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura finished testifying on Friday. CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi joins us now here in Studio 57 in New York with more on this. Caroline, good to see you. So explain what testimony may be thrown out and why.
Yeah, Chanel, it's looking more and more like that testimony will not be thrown out. Obviously, last week was all about the star witness, Cassie Ventura, star victim, I should say. She's victim #1 in that government indictment. But the testimony from Dawn Richard was meant to corroborate some of Cassie's abuse. And part of that corroboration was an incident that she testified about when Diddy actually, she alleged, hit Cassie with a skillet. She was making eggs. He got, enraged and hit her with a skillet. Now, she also testified that thereafter, Diddy told her that people who spoke about these types of things tend to disappear, and that she took that as a threat on her life. The defense attorneys, rightfully so, objected to a lot of this testimony, saying much of it was hearsay. In trials, there are very strict rules of evidence. The judge is concerned that a lot of these now corroborating witnesses may be veering into hearsay, gossip. You only want witnesses to testify, and they're only allowed to testify to things that they directly saw or heard. So that's part of this objection, as well as this statement that Diddy apparently made to her. We're already seeing the defense today really try to get into those inconsistencies in Richard's testimony about whether did she actually witness this abuse or did she just see perhaps the aftermath of it. So that's kind of the issue here. The issue is the scope of the testimony. It does seem that the judge is going to allow that testimony to stand on Friday, but going into more of this testimony today, there may be a sort of a tighter scope around what they can testify to.
Yeah, and I wonder, because you mentioned this, Cassie finishing her days-long stretch of emotional testimony last week, and how will her testimony then impact how the case moves forward?
Yeah, she was a very credible witness, I do have to say. Obviously testified to years of abuse. The defense is already acknowledging that this was a domestic violence relationship. The question is, can the prosecution prove that this was sex trafficking, that this was a RICO conspiracy? So you'll see witnesses this week like Cassie's mother, her best friend of over 17 years, corroborating this information about the abuse. Now, the defense is saying, all right, there were instances of abuse, but how is that relevant necessarily to force, fraud, or coercion relating to sex trafficking? So that's kind of what the argument is here. The defense is saying these are just bad acts witnesses. We call them bad acts witnesses because traditionally that type of testimony is not allowed in trials when that specific conduct isn't being charged. He's not being charged with domestic violence or assault in this case. So that will be an issue coming up. But I think it's all about corroboration this week.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to make. And Caroline, also want to ask just about next steps. Are there any other key witnesses that you'll be expecting to hear from?
Yeah, certainly. Remember, there are other victims in this case. There are other co-conspirators in this case that haven't been charged. So we're expected to hear from personal assistants and chefs, things like that, to Diddy, and whether or not they are sort of victims as well as co-conspirators. That'll be maybe a fine line to draw, but certainly with information about drug use. Remember, we heard about that potential arson, obstruction of justice. Remember, those are more of the elements involved in this racketeering conspiracy that the government really hasn't gotten on the table yet, and I would expect we would hear this week.
All right, Caroline Polisi, thank you.
Thank you.
Doing terrible, horrible things. Not a sex abuse case, not a domestic assault case, but that there was this conspiracy to have this criminal enterprise, that all this different foundation of this force, fraud, and these actions on his part and these different players building it up to traffic women and men, evidently too, because you have these male prostitutes across state lines to engage in this commercial sex acts. So it's not just that he beat her. It's not just that he hit her with a skillet. It's not just that he maybe not forced her to take drugs, and she maybe did engage on her own in these freak-offs, but it's building that criminal enterprise conspiracy. Much more difficult on its face.
Yeah, and we'll get to the defense, what the defense will be in a second, but at least first, continuing on the prosecution and what they're trying to do in order to prove force, fraud, and coercion. What exactly do they need to elicit from these witnesses? Dawn Richard testified on Friday that she did see an example of abuse. Diddy, she testified, Sean Combs beat Cassie Ventura, or he saw her with a skillet or whatnot. But what more besides that?
Yes, John, you're absolutely right. That is exactly what the prosecution needs to show, that it was more than a consensual relationship, as the defense tried very hard to paint during Cassie's cross-examination. They need to elicit from Dawn Richard more details about this abusive conduct, because recall, on cross, the defense kind of left the impression
impression with the jury that maybe Sean Combs only became violent when he was coming down off of drugs. Maybe he was bipolar. But no, already Don Richard has kind of dispelled that by saying he got mad about not answering fast enough and then beat her with a skillet and dragged her upstairs by her hair and then threatened them both. And that is key because agreeing to do something consensually is one thing, but Don Richard basically said she was afraid she was going to die if she did not do what Combs said. So all of that is very corroborative of Ventura's account, and it also goes to Combs' intent, which is key for the trafficking charge.
How will the defense, Elise, we'll keep going with you on this, what will the defense do to counter these witnesses after they come?
Yeah, the defense is going to have to employ the classic playbook, which is to discredit and impeach this witness. So Don Richard had a long-standing relationship with Diddy, a professional relationship spanned over a decade. So expect them to ask questions about having seen this abusive conduct and being afraid that she's going to be killed, but continuing to work with him. Asking the motivations. She has her own lawsuit, which she filed against Diddy in September, where she alleges some of this same conduct. But expect the defense to paint that as a money grab, because that would be the motivation for her to provide this testimony if it's not true.
Jeremy, how successful has the defense been so far during its cross of Cassie Ventura in planting some of the seeds that they will need going forward?
They planted some, but nothing exceptional. So if you're going to argue, for example, the timing of a particular rape and whether or not that's accurate, that's a difficult lift to do, because I think they're still established that it was against her will. Do you believe that maybe if she's off by a certain period?
No money works for Zlatan, and not Zlatan for money.
And Allah will ask
about money. Well, no, I didn't cancel my tour because of the money. I canceled my tour separately. So it's difficult. I don't know if they've done the job they needed to do with her, but I think that goes to the point that there's still a lot more to come. You're going to have text messages. You're going to have the transactional records. You're going to have other witnesses who are going to testify and bolster up Cassie Ventura. It's not just going to rise and fall solely on her shoulders.
You did express some curiosity that Cassie Ventura's mother is on this witness list.
Yeah, a lot of what she's going to likely say would be hearsay. There is an allegation that I came across involving something about the reaching out to the father by Diddy about I'm her father now, or I'm her dad now and she's my daughter, basically family set aside. I don't know whether or not the mother was privy to that call, but there's going to be a lot of hearsay in that, so I'm not sure. I don't think there's allegations that she saw the injuries as alleged, but we'll find out. But she's not really a critical witness. I think some of the other players are much more important.
And Elise, just finally, do you think 6 weeks, the prosecution really needs 6 full weeks to lay out its case, given where it is right now?
It's a good question, and I remember thinking after this first week, wow, that's a long time. Ventura testified very early because she's 8.5 months pregnant. They had to get her on the stand. Remember, this is a RICO case, so it's not just about the sex trafficking. Prosecutors have to show that Combs was running his businesses as corrupt enterprises, which means they were organizations that were committing crimes. So I would bet that the balance of this trial is going to be corroborative of Ventura's story. They also have to bring in the other victims, the unnamed victims, but they're also going to have to lay the foundation for this RICO charge and explain how he conspired with more than one person and how he was running Bad Boy Records as a corrupt organization. So they might need that time.
Yeah, data and records often part of RICO cases. We'll see if this becomes a data-heavy case. Jeremy Solan, Elise Adamson, thanks so much for being with us. I do appreciate it.
Explosive start in the trial of Sean Combs today. A former member of the musical group Diddy Kane is set to return to the stand to testify in the case against him. Dawn Richard testified Friday that she saw Combs attack his former girlfriend Cassie Ventura in 2009. CNN's Kara Scannell is outside the court with more details. What all can we expect to hear from her today as she takes the stand, and later this week as well?
Good morning, Sarah. So Dawn Richard will be back on the witness stand this morning. Friday, her testimony, she said she witnessed Combs come downstairs into the kitchen, take a skillet with eggs in it, and attempt to hit Cassie Ventura, his then girlfriend, over the head. She also testified that Combs dragged Ventura up to the bedroom and she could hear glass breaking and yelling. The next day, Richard said Combs asked her to come back to his home into the recording studio. She said he locked the door and then told her where he comes from. People who speak sometimes go missing. She said that she took that as a threat. So she will be back on the witness stand this morning. Her testimony is supposed to wrap up pretty quickly, and then the prosecution is going to call Ventura's former best friend. We heard a lot about her last week. Her name is Carrie Morgan. She's expected to testify, and Ventura testified she was friends with Morgan before she met Combs and was friends with her throughout the relationship until Ventura said Combs hit Morgan, and that ended their friendship. So Morgan expected to be a prosecution witness who will corroborate some of what Ventura has said. After that, they're going to call a couple of people who worked for Combs, including a former personal assistant, a former chef. Prosecution said they also expect to call an escort this week, as well as Ventura's mother. Ventura has testified that she told her mother about some of the physical abuse at the hands of Combs at one point in their relationship. So she will be another witness that the prosecution is calling this week. And of course, this is just week 2 of what the prosecution says will be 6 weeks of their presenting their case to the jury. Sarah?
And the picture they are painting is one of a man with a lot of power and a man with what appears to be, in their evidence, a scary guy that was threatening to a lot of people. We'll see how the defense deals with that. It's Kara Scannell. Great reporting from the court, as usual. Appreciate it. John?
All right, Jeremy Saland, also former federal prosecutor Elise Adamson. And Jeremy, let me just start with you, because I'm curious, after the testimony of Cassie Ventura, which in a way is the bulk of the prosecution case, what left do they have to do? What are they now trying to do with these witnesses in order to prove the sex trafficking and racketeering charges?
Force, fraud, coercion. Not just a bad, ugly guy doing terrible, horrible things. Not a sex abuse case, not a domestic assault case, but that there was this conspiracy to have this criminal enterprise, that all this different foundation of this force, fraud, and these actions on his part and these different players, building it up to traffic women and men, evidently too, because you have these male prostitutes across state lines to engage in this commercial sex acts. So it's not just that he beat her. It's not just that he hit her with a skillet. It's not just that he maybe not forced her to take drugs and she maybe did engage on her own in these freak-offs, but it's building that criminal enterprise conspiracy. Much more difficult on its face.
Yeah, and we'll get to the defense, what the defense will be in a second, but at least in coercion. What exactly do they need to elicit from these witnesses? Dawn Richard testified on Friday that she did see an example of abuse. Diddy, she testified how Sean Combs beat Cassie Ventura, or he saw her with a skillet or whatnot. But what more besides that?
Yes, John, you're absolutely right. That is exactly what the prosecution needs to show, that it was more than a consensual relationship, as the defense tried very hard to paint during Cassie's cross-examination. They need to elicit from Dawn Richard more details about this abusive conduct, because recall, on cross, the defense kind of left the impression with the jury that maybe Sean Combs only became violent when he was coming down off of drugs, maybe he was bipolar, but no, already Dawn Richard has kind of dispelled that by not answering fast enough, and then beat her with a skillet and dragged her upstairs by her hair. And